So today we are here for an update on my Reading Around the Spanish-Speaking World challenge. So I finished the 5th country, but I still didn't want to make this video because this has been the challenge of bunny trails. Like, I just keep going down bunny trails, and so I kept being like, oh, once I just read one more book, then I can make the update video. But that is never going to end, so I thought that I would just make a video explaining why I haven't made a video about this. I'll just walk you down all the bunny trails with me. So first, let's talk about Mexico, I guess. So in English, I have read 3 books from Mexico during this challenge. I have read Paradise by Fernanda Melchor, The Iliac Crest by Cristina Rivera Garza, and Aura by Carlos Fuentes. I may have read also, by the way, for this challenge, I'm not really counting like fantasy books, children's books, that sort of thing that don't necessarily center around the country. Some of them that are kind of borderline I might include, but you know, there may be books that I've read from these countries that I'm not including, but anyway. I really enjoyed all 3 of these books. None of them are all-time favorites, but I still really liked all of them. So Paradise is a story of 2 boys who grow up in very different circumstances, but kind of coincidentally both hanging out at this luxury housing development. One of them works at the housing development, and one of them lives there with his grandfather or grandparents. And this is kind of an examination of toxic masculinity, violence, all the different threads of pain and hatred and self-loathing and loathing of other people that weave their way through, you know, Mexican society, through really all society at this point. And yeah, very disturbing book on basically every level, but very, very fascinating. And I do want to read Fernanda Melchor's other works. The other most famous one is Hurricane Season. And yeah, I haven't read anything else by her yet in either Spanish or English. The Iliac Crest and Aura, I did read both in both English and Spanish. They are both quite short, especially Aura. The Iliac Crest examines a lot of things about gender, about society, the erasure of women, and literally and metaphorically in Mexican society. It was written in the 90s, I think, and was maybe only translated fairly recently into English. But it was specifically discussing one author, and I still want to do more research about what that story is, kind of what the background was, read maybe some of that author's works. A very, very interesting, very weird, thought-provoking book, and also very atmospheric. Like, even though I didn't understand what was happening, I still kind of felt like I was there and felt like it was happening around me. Aura is a short story or novella that is very much just kind of a horror or creepy, unsettling story. So you're following a writer who answers a job posting for basically being like a biographer or like a archivist of this man's papers and journals and everything. And so he goes there, and it is a house inhabited by this old woman and her niece, Aura. And there's something very obviously wrong with this place and with the situation from the very start, but the man is completely overtaken by an obsession for Aura. And so he seems to be completely oblivious to all of the very bizarre things happening around him until kind of it's too late. This one was very, very interesting to read as a side-by-side translation because I had a bilingual edition of it, and I do think that in this case the English translation was not very good, which was, you know, a very presumptuous thing to feel as someone who is not fluent in Spanish, but it was done in like the 60s, the translation, and I just think that it was maybe when the philosophy of translation was maybe slightly different. I don't know. This is all me talking out of my ass pretty much, but there were clear cases where I would look from one side of the page to the other and think, well, that made complete sense translated directly, and you chose to change it, or you chose to take something out or add something. Like, it was interesting in one case, it literally added a whole piece of dialogue. If I'm remembering correctly, he was asking if they had brought his bags from his previous place. Like, he was like, oh, can I go get my bags or something like that? And they said, do you have to, or something like that? And he said, no importa, or something like that. Like, it's not important. And the English translation changed it to, like, it's not important, I can get them tomorrow, or something like that. And I was like, that is completely different. That is, like, completely different. Kind of my pending read from Mexico is a nonfiction. It is this book by Tenoch Huerta. If he looks familiar, he is Namor in Black Panther 2. That is this actor. But this is a nonfiction book about racism in Mexico. So the kind of blurb is, Mexico is a racist country that denies being so, with arguments like, it's not racism, it's classism. Here, we're all mixed, or we never had a system of segregation like in the United States. We negate that we deny that we're perpetuating the discrimination for generations. This, I believe, is only in Spanish right now, but yeah, I'm very, very interested to read more about it. It is something that I see a lot on social media, people saying that, Latin America does not have racism and stuff like that, which is, fairly obviously not true. So very interested to read that. So Colombia, I have read a book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez in both Spanish and English, so technically I was done right then, but I read Chronicle of a Death Foretold, and I did like it. Again, I liked it, I think I've said this before, but I liked it more in retrospect than I did while I was reading it. I tried to read it basically simultaneously, so I would read a section in Spanish and then I would read it in English, or vice versa, to make sure that I was understanding it, because Gabriel Garcia Marquez is by far the most difficult Spanish I have read yet. He, uses very elevated vocabulary, very complex structures and everything, and so just very difficult for me to read, but that's not, a problem. That's good for me. But yeah, I think it ended up feeling like a school assignment or something reading it that way, so I will not continue to read anything else that way. But I do want to reread that at some point, because I do think that it was an unfair way to read it. But basically, this is following a small town where someone is murdered, and everyone in the town knew that it was going to happen before it happened, and just kind of through a comedy of errors, through minding your own business, through assuming that someone else would do something about it, all these different complex happenings, no one stopped it from happening. And so it was a very, very interesting read, and very beautiful. Just this past month, I read The Bitch by Pilar Quintana, which was a very short, again, atmospheric, coastal, brutal tale of a kind of loveless marriage, a lack of community, a lack of care surrounding this woman who basically adopts a dog and gradually turns on the dog, kind of. I don't know, it's very hard to talk about what this book is about. I liked it, I didn't love it, I probably won't read it in Spanish. Then pending books that I have for Colombia right now, the only ones I own are 100 Years of Solitude in both English and Spanish. I do really, really want to read this. I think that I will absolutely love it. And so I will probably read it in Spanish. No, I will probably read it in English first and then wait some time and read it in Spanish. So that's the plan, at least. Let's do Spain next. I'm saving my most bunny trailish countries for last. So from Spain, I read Dogs of Summer by Andrea Abreu in English. This was a short literary novel set in Tenerife, I believe, in the Canary Islands, following a young girl who is growing up very, very impoverished, kind of next door to the tourist industry, so next door to very, very wealthy people and massive vacation homes and that sort of thing. But she is growing up with her friend who she is very, very obsessed with, and they are kind of running wild. They have a general kind of lack of, I don't want to say adequate care, but kind of they have complicated, abusive family dynamics, at least one of them at least. I did really like this book. I think that depending on your personal experiences and such, it may resonate more with some people than with others. I think that the writing was amazing. It is definitely very explicit, like very, and I don't just mean that like sexually, it's very physical, very embodied, very, very skilled. I very much look forward to what this author does in the future. I basically just wanted more from it. I have read actually a lot from Spain in Spanish, but most of it has not felt super important. That's gonna sound terrible. I don't mean that, but like a lot more of it has been like genre fiction than from other countries. So I first read El Silencio de la Ciudad Blanca, which is a crime novel. I have read several more crime novels from Dolores Redondo. I have read a sci-fi book by Rosa Montero. I also read this book by Rosa Montero, which is a kind of combined biography of Marie Curie along with personal essays and memoir type content about Rosa Montero's life. Not super Spain-centric, but worth the read nonetheless. So this coming month, actually, for a book club that I'm in, I'm supposed to read Sin Noticias de Gerb. I said that so English, but anyway, this is a book in which an alien goes to Barcelona, and it's him, I think, just wandering around Barcelona talking about what he's seeing. So that should be very, very interesting. Another one that I have on deck is another nonfiction called Feminismo para Principiantes. Yeah, so I would like to read more literary fiction from Spain. There's a series about the Spanish Civil War, I believe, by Almudena Grande something, I believe, and I have that one on my wish list to read. So my two most bunny trail countries so far have been Chile and Argentina. So let's talk about Argentina. First, I read two books by Samantha Schweblin in English, Fever Dream and Mouthful of Birds. Fever Dream is a very short novel that is truly essentially about a fever dream. So it's this woman talking to a mysterious character about how she ended up in this situation where she is clearly dying. And so it's a very like uncertain of what's happening, of what happened, but potentially some kind of poisoning or environmental type situation. So very, very interesting. It's very low commitment because it is so short, so I highly recommend it. Mouthful of Birds is a short story collection by the same author. Didn't love it. Several of the stories were very like good, but not good enough that I was like obsessed with them. And other stories I truly didn't get it. Like I just did not get it. So it was okay. I do still want to read everything else that she has written. In Spanish, I read Las Cosas que Perdimos en el Fuego, and then I also reread this in English, listened to it in English. It's called Things We Lost in the Fire, and this is a short story collection by Mariana Enriquez, and I loved this. Very good, in my opinion. This is horror stories, so they are very disturbing, very explicit about different societal issues, about, you know, kind of taking things to an extreme in order to talk about them. Yeah, really, really enjoyed this. I do want to read everything else that she has written. And then one that I have on the immediate TBR is 19 Claws and a Blackbird by Agustina Basterica, who wrote Tender as the Flesh, which I love. I read this before I started the challenge, so it doesn't count, but I do want to reread this in Spanish, and I want to read 19 Claws and a Blackbird in Spanish, but I have the ARC for the translated version, so I need to read that before it comes out in June. But this is a short story collection, and I am so excited for it. I have no idea what it's supposed to be about, but given this book, I feel like we can promise that it is going to be some hard-hitting social commentary, which is right up my alley. I think our most obsessed country for me so far has been Chile. First book that I read was The Twilight Zone by Nona Fernandez. This is a book about the Pinochet dictatorship and what it was like to live under that, essentially. It is about a documentarian basically working on compiling snippets and news stories and personal testimonies and interviews and stuff from a Chilean secret police officer and from people that were involved or were victims. She's looking back on this decades later, but obviously those impacts are still there. Really, really highly recommend this book. I've only read it in English so far, but they did have it at Half Price Books one time, and so I did purchase it in Spanish, and I definitely want to reread it in Spanish. I read Space Invaders by the same author, very much the same topics, but told in a very, very different way. It's a very short book, and it is essentially following a very minor character from The Twilight Zone. It was written first. Space Invaders was written first, but a very small mention of a girl whose father was involved with the secret police, who ended up getting killed, is made in The Twilight Zone, and then Space Invaders actually tells that story from the perspective of her classmates. Yeah, it was even more abstract than The Twilight Zone. I think that if I had read it first, I honestly don't know that I would have understood what it was about, because I wouldn't have had the appropriate context. I was very, and still am, but was very, very uneducated on the Pinochet dictatorship. So I do recommend The Twilight Zone first, and then I do have now Voyager by Nona Fernandez as well. This is new, I believe, and it is a kind of more of a memoir. It is her experience with her mother, I believe. She seems to always tell her stories through the frame of some kind of nerdy thing. So The Twilight Zone was obviously telling them through the frame of the show The Twilight Zone. Space Invaders was through the game Space Invaders, and then this is through the Voyager space mission. So very, very interesting. I can't wait to read this. If I like this, I will probably try to get a copy in Spanish to read as well. Again, very short. So then I fell down the Isabel Allende wormhole, and so I have finished La Casa de los Espíritus, which I absolutely loved. Is definitely a new favorite. This is a very sweeping, multi-generational epic story that does, follow historical events in Chile, but, is about so much more than just that, but also really, really digging into all of these sociological, cultural, personal things that led up to that, and the political environment and the other countries that were involved in the events in Chile. I am currently reading another Isabel Allende book called Hija de la Fortuna. I also own 2 more books by her that I have picked up used. I do plan to read all of her books now, so that will be a very long mission because she does have a lot out and she is still writing. I just saw an announcement that she has a new book out this year, which she just came out with Violeta last year, I think. So she's gonna keep me busy. But that's okay. And then because I have been so fascinated, I have actually started a nonfiction book, which does not count for this challenge because it was originally written in English, but it is called The Pinochet File, and it was written by an NSA analyst or something like that, who has done a lot of work on the declassification of documents, particularly for U.S. operations in Latin America. So he also worked on the Bay of Pigs declassification project. And so this is going through in detail all of the files from the Kissinger stuff, the Nixon administration. I believe it actually started with the Kennedy administration and then carried on, well past that. It is absolutely appalling, but also extremely enlightening, not just about Latin America and the things that have happened in Latin America due to U.S. intervention, but also our, things that have happened in the U.S., how the U.S. is. So essentially, the U.S. all but created the coup in Chile, which ousted the democratically elected socialist president Salvador Allende, who was Isabel Allende's cousin, and installed Augusto Pinochet, who had a decades-long, extremely brutal, extremely lethal dictatorship in Chile. The U.S., very openly, that's what I can't even believe, in these documents, obviously it wasn't open to the public people at that time, but very openly in their discussions of it, Nixon and Kissinger and everybody was very open about the fact that they could not allow communism to take hold in Latin America and have it be successful, because then, it would be damaging to the psyche of the U.S., of the people in the U.S. And so they very openly talked about wanting there to be a middle-class revolution in order to prevent there being a working-class revolution. Basically you've got to give the majority of people just enough to keep them docile and prevent them from actually figuring out what we're doing. It's very explicit, what they are doing. So anyway, I've completely gone off on a side trail here. This is what I'm telling you. The bunny trails, man. I don't read history books almost ever, but despite occasionally being dry in some portions, this is a very, very interesting book, and if you are interested in the history of Chile at all, I highly recommend it. Yeah, that is, I think, the end of what I have read, what is still on deck to be read. Obviously, there are many, many more that I know that I want to read, that I don't yet know that I want to read, but I did just want to give an update because I have finished 5 countries, but I just don't feel like I've finished them yet, because all that reading something from a country does is introduce me to 5 more things that I want to read from that country. So it's going to be a miracle if I ever finish this challenge, to be honest, but that's okay. I am enjoying it greatly. So if you have recommendations for these countries or any other Spanish speaking country, definitely leave them in the comments. I would be happy to go on more bunny trails. So thank you for watching and have a good one.